There you go.
Always something.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the cross-stage Think Big for the ops section. This is a chance for all of us in strategy side of things, so design and product management, to come together and talk about some of the bigger, larger scale cross-stage issues that we're trying to work through. Today, Nadia and Maria have something really interesting to talk about. So I'm going to pass it off to Nadia to get us started with that conversation.
Unfortunately, so please let me know if I cut off, and then hopefully Maria would be able to jump in. But yeah, without further ado, hopefully you all had a chance to have a look at the mural board. Basically, I wanted to gather everyone here who has some interest or knowledge or ideas around as a feature and the future of Autodevops in GitLab. There's been lots of conversations going on the product team, and I kickstarted a conversation around the UX of Autodevops and kind of how it's created within the GitLab product. And personally, I have my ideas of what we have with the user experience, how AutoDevOps works with the rest of GitLab, or how it's integrated into the like CI/CD onboarding, which it's currently not integrated in any way with that. But I don't have a very good understanding of, like all of the nitty-gritty details of how AutoDevOps works, its shortcomings, and so on. So basically, the goal of this meeting, the way I envision it, is to give everyone a chance to express their thoughts and ideas around what are the problems that we have, what is AutoDevOps, and what is your vision for the future, and how do you think we could leverage it? So kind of discuss the problems and the ideas around it, and then hopefully we can also identify in AutoDevOps and discuss how we could further collaborate on it. I know that product has been having lots of conversations around it. There's now talk about moving AutoDevOps to the pipeline authoring team. So yeah, we can get to that. But I wanted to get started with just talking about the problems that I see from the user experience, from the So as I transitioned to the newly created pipeline authoring team and started looking at CI/CD workflows and what does the onboarding look like for CI/CD, talking about the 3-year vision for pipeline authoring, and we would talk a lot about automation and how we want to make pipeline authoring as automated as possible eventually. So if we're talking about a job to be done that we have at pipeline authoring, so I want to author a CI/CD pipeline so I can automate tasks on my team. And if we start diving deeper, one of the user stories might be, when I'm authoring my CI/CD pipeline, I want that process to be as automated as possible to make my job easier, to make it easy and quick to create a CI/CD pipeline for my project that meets my needs. And it seems like AutoDevOps attempts to solve a similar problem, maybe for like kind of a narrow subset of our users who use certain platforms and so on, but it does provide that automation component. But currently, it's very disconnected from the CI/CD workflow. So and in the mural board, you can see that I linked this issue. It's called Align the User Experience for AutoDevOps and CI/CD. And I haven't proposed any solutions, basically just wanted to narrow down on that problem and define that problem. And it seems like there are some other teams that also have an interest in AutoDevOps. So Maria perhaps can talk more, or Justin or someone else can jump in to talk more about auto DevOps and security. And yeah, there were some other problems that were added to the problem section. So whoever has something to add, feel free to take over from here and share your perspective.
Do you mind if I jump in? Because I want to make sure that when we're discussing this, it's a think big. So I'd like to make sure we keep grounded. I'll lift ourselves up a little bit towards the long-term vision and what we're trying to serve here. I know that there's a lot of problems and it involves a lot of different teams, and so that can muddy the waters, but I want to make sure I at least assert what I think is the long-term value and kind of magic of auto DevOps. It is this, let me start with, I think we're not talking about what it is today. It has the potential to be something that is very transformational for GitLab as a single DevOps platform. It kind of spans many, if not all of our stages. And what it can be is, if you think about today, our process of asking a customer to use our tool involves, like, if we say, oh, you want to use review apps, you have to kind of write this very toilsome YAML to directly configure exactly how you want to use review apps. If you want to, James and I were talking about today, if you want to make sure you're using our JUnit test report widget, you kind of have to like go and configure this very prescriptive YAML, and you might not even be aware that that's something you could do. And Auto DevOps has the potential to really expand the completeness of our platform and make it easy for our users to expand the completeness of their use of our platform by being smart about when to showcase, like, oh, hey, here's something super simple you could do to add to your pipeline, or we automatically added that by default. It kind of gives the notion of today we make our users navigate through this kind of forest to figure out how to get to their complete DevOps pipeline. It can make that a lot easier. And so that's important for our users because it means they're getting the satisfaction of not having to go through that toil. It also means that they get the satisfaction of using things that they wouldn't have discovered otherwise. It's super satisfying to us as a business because it increases our stages per user, which we know increases the likelihood of customers to increase their tier and also increases their stickiness with our platform going forward. So it is very like transformational in my mind, and to date we created it. If some of the history of AutoDevOps is we created it for a very like visionary purpose to say this is where GitLab is headed, and I think we've not necessarily pushed that vision significantly forward, but there's a lot of room to grow. One thing that Sam, I think, put in one of the MRs, this analogy is really, really apt. Before we had Google Maps, we would think, oh, the way that I figure out how to get from Kansas City to Los Angeles is I pull out a physical map and I like chart my course and I hope that I can find a gas station along the way and maybe I stop and ask for some help. And hopefully I don't get involved in a wreck that means I'm delayed for 4 hours. Now you can just say, hey, Google Maps, I want to go from Kansas City to Los Angeles, and it routes you around the wrecks. It finds where you should stop to get gas. Like that kind of smarts is what we should be thinking about Auto DevOps's vision. And so I want to make sure that we ground ourselves in that. There's a lot of questions about how it works today, what works, what doesn't work, but there's a lot of potential value and vision in where we can take this.
If I can add from a UX perspective, I think Auto DevOps is super useful and we can have a great vision, but at the moment in the UI, it's really disconnected. It's really hard to understand what it is, how to use it, what benefits it gives you. So we have in settings, you can enable Auto DevOps for a project. Then in my knowledge, to work with a cluster, you have to go to the cluster and set your DNS. And there's no link between these two steps. And then for CI/CD, I have no idea how you would use Auto DevOps. So I think if we figure out the problems, well, the user journeys that Auto DevOps could be used, we could also figure out how to surface in the UI.
Here's a left field thing. Should we even be considering this within the context of using the word auto DevOps? Is that locking us into what it is today? Should we just be locking it into more as a user, we want them to turn on everything. How do we get them there? Because that's really what Kenny's saying auto DevOps should be. So maybe
Yeah.
Yeah.
back it up to how do we get a user to show up and turn on all the things?
I thought of like the
I would-
worst user experience you could think of that does something like that, and I came up with Clippy. It's like GitLab's version of Clippy, right? Like it's going to go recommend to you. Here's all the things you could be using, which was a horrible pattern, but still.
Yeah, I think all of us are mostly speaking by the same time, but I would definitely emphasize the word magic. It was mentioned by Kenny as well, I guess. But when I think about really amazing product experiences, like Heroku, when it first started, and I remember making my first push to Heroku, I was like, wow, and it's just out, and it's brilliant. And then I had to figure out how to connect a database behind it, but it was already up and out, so it was great. The same thing when I first saw on one of my GitHub repositories, when GitHub sent me a security issue on a repository that I did not touch for 3 years, and nobody touched for 3 years. I knew that was used by one of my ex-employers, but that's all. And I was like, whoa, that's great. I know that there's a security, something to be fixed there. So, and I don't think that it should be transparent for the user as long as it provides, as it fulfills the jobs to be done, even me not being aware of that possibility. And Autodevops, doesn't matter how we call it, but has this potential, I think. So when you start a new project, you can basically benefit from all the features of GitLab out of the box, or with a very nice wizard, as Brad Downey pointed out in one of the issues that's linked in the mural board as well. So it's like, that's how I envision Autodevops. So it's really automatic, it's really magical. And if you want to learn more what's going behind the scenes, then I would make it obvious. So I wouldn't hide it as we hide it today, but I would provide you all the CI templates or whatever we put there, because you might want to customize it, or you might want to add something to it, which means that we did not fulfill our promise, but that's the that's the idea. That's my vision around Autodevops. That's really automatic magic.
And I think another perspective to what Nicole was saying, and I think you may have said this, Victor, in an issue, or maybe I heard you say it somewhere else, but the idea of Auto DevOps it may have grown old and we've ruined it by it not working right, but it's also might be something where we have some cachet already, where people recognize it as the tool in GitLab that does all of these things. So maybe there is some marketing value to still keeping the name. That might be something to consider.
Yeah, I say this often, but at the same time, I agree with Nicole in the sense that Autodevops could be a brand name, and we should approach this discussion without looking at the current content of Autodevops.
Yeah.
And we also need to think about who is coming in to our tool. So I've talked to people who don't do Auto DevOps, not really quite sure what it is, but they could benefit greatly from it. But they just don't do it currently in their company. It's not a process that their team or their manager supports. So how would we want to give them the magic, but also inform them, hey, it's not just GitLab magic. Like, we're also doing this thing called Auto DevOps. And on the other end, for those who are used to it, how do we support their expectations of doing things that fall under the Auto DevOps category, and make it seem like magic, and then also point them to where they can learn more about this magic if they need to.
I would add one more point to this, is that I made quite a few interviews as well. And what I've heard is that people who think they use Auto DevOps, they actually don't. So that side exists as well.
That's a good point. Mm-hmm.
Seriously, whenever I was looking for users who were recommended to me by solution architects or TAMs, that look, you can, if you want to run some interviews with Autodevops users, interview them. And I did the interview, and it turned out that they use some of the templates that compose Auto DevOps, but they write their own CI, and they would like us to make the Auto DevOps template more customizable, so they don't have to maintain their own customizations, just minor edits on top of it. So even the people who think that they use Auto DevOps, they actually don't. They use, I don't know, a weird approach to what the vision is about, I would say.
I think this is the main problem we have right now is it's either it's magic and it works, or then you have nothing. Because when you move from this is magic and it works out of the box to it doesn't work, I need to dig into it, you have a huge amount of things to deal with. And this is a huge barrier to me. And honestly, we had a ton of projects we wanted to enable to DevOps and it didn't work. So we had to go the manual route. And this is why I really like the approach suggested by Nicole to try to highlight how the components of how the DevOps provide, and maybe have each stage is able to plug into a system where they can enable, they can provide some detection logic so that it's easy for a given project to quickly see what can work with that project. And they could just tick boxes to choose what they want. And anything that doesn't work could be customized specifically, but without, getting rid of everything else. So having a more composable approach would help us probably to achieve that quicker than trying to make it work, because honestly, I might lack ambition about that, but I don't think there is a place where we can have this working out of the box for every project, particularly when it comes to the secure features. We have tons of integration issues because of the very various environments a project can run in. And I'm not sure there is one day where we could support them all out of the box.
Well, backing up, because I asked this in product multiple times and I never really got great answers, but we use variables, project level variables today to try and determine some things. And I almost feel like we don't have enough of them. So if we look at the first job to be done, when I start a new project, I want to get up and running as quickly and easily as possible. So would kind of the concept of this magical solution be that because I know like we're talking about a one-click solution, but if we wanted to be a little more realistic, what if it was like a multi-click solution where you kind of came in and said, I want to set it up, and it's like we've run some kind of detection against whatever it is you're doing and say, hey, here's like a pretty map of what you have. So think like pipeline view, but way fancier. Like here's what's currently going to happen. We can't quite tell where you're deploying to. Are you deploying to AWS or Azure? Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because that doesn't seem to be configured yet. And hey, it seems that you don't have like, we want to automatically turn on DAST and SAST, but you're not using review apps, which will disable DAST. So did you want to turn on review apps? And just kind of like prompt you, kind of like someone was saying, show them what's going on behind the scenes, like say, here's all the journey that you're going to currently go through, but we can't help you here, here, and here until we get the piece of information about, are you going to Azure? Are you going to use a review app? And if you click turn on the review app, we'll try and do as much as we can, but maybe we need to ask you for like one piece of information. Because I mean, that's what the first job to be done is basically saying, is like, how do we push them to adopt as many stages as possible with bothering them as least as possible? So could like one of the principles for product now is try to make it work by default in as many cases as possible, which is never going to be all the cases, but maybe just prompt them for that one or two additional things, like turn on review apps and we can help you with this, or turn on that and we can help you with that.
Yeah, and the question what you're hitting on is like today we say auto DevOps is this thing that it should just automatically work for everything. And to Olivier's point, that's not realistic. What we should be saying is we are here to just like the Clippy example, which I hate. It's like, we're here to help you evolve. Like you've gotten to this point where, hey, maybe it makes sense for you to add this additional SaaS scanner, but like we're informing you about it. It's a huge product discovery capability too for us. But yeah, it's not gonna immediately just work out of the box. And we have worked around that fact in Auto DevOps for a long time because you don't want your first pipeline run to be 40 minutes long. So we have like scoped down and made concessions in that regard. But we can think about it like this is a journey. Our users are on a journey. They don't need the whole DevOps pipeline today, but they need to get started and we need to guide them on steps as they go.
I really like the idea. Go ahead, Justin.
No, I was just going to say the idea Clippy wasn't bad. It was just implemented poorly, kind of like Auto DevOps.
Yes, I agree with that wholeheartedly. One thing I wanted to call out is for the package users who tends to be a later stage transition when it comes to DevOps in general, we've heard the same thing of if we presented them with the idea, we saw you publish packages in CI, and then if you just click this button, we'll automatically set up a registry and you can just try it. We're not going to blow anything up. We're just going to let you see what it's like. And we've heard consistently from users that that would enable them. Usually it's the story of it would enable an engineer to show their DevOps manager at their company that it's actually a really useful idea and to just do it because this is all it takes. And I would imagine that story is pretty similar to what some of the other folks have heard.
There's one thing I don't understand here, sorry, in this line of thinking, which is that we are reacting to our users instead of asking them what they want before. Because what I've heard from the best salespeople I know is that they actually don't tell anything to their prospects. They just ask from their prospects what they want and then repeat what they've heard. And I think we could build a similar thing around AutoDevOps as well, is that we don't have to figure out with amazing logic and AI and machine learning and all the nice things that, yeah, these people are building packages. No, we could ask them when they create their project that do you want to publish a package out of that? And if they say yes, then we can say, then in this case, here we go. And that, or is something that's easy to kind of automate because they told us that I want to publish a package. And it's a great data point as well for us actually when they create the project that we know what kind of projects are running on GitLab and what target it is. Is it container? Is it specific something? And I mentioned that comment. That's really cool.
And Nadia brought up Brad Downey had an interesting post on one of those issues where he walked through a series of steps or questions that we would sort of ask the user once they kicked off a project, which is similar to what I think you're getting at, Victor. And to me, it does feel like this is an out-of-box experience sort of setup scenario where we do as much as we can to understand what they've got so we can ask them the right questions. That might be the background magic, but we still have to get some input. And I think, Nicole, you were saying this too.
I wanted to take it a step back because when I joined and people were explaining AutoDevOps to me, and also at the commit in London, users said I wouldn't use AutoDevOps because I want to have more ownership of and all the complex pipelines and setups. So I'm wondering, is the direction we are discussing for all personas and types of companies, or are we discussing like smaller companies that don't have a big team for the DevOps?
And that's why I wrote the second job that's there, because I think the first job might be for either a new user to DevOps or maybe a smaller company that isn't quite sure about CI/CD, but they've heard about it. It sounds cool. So we can help them get up and running. But once they mature, the second job is like, okay, now that you're up and running and you've got your project up in place, now I can start hacking at it and converting it to be more relevant to the changes that my company has had.
And is that the same? Is that the same persona though, all the way through? Because some smaller companies tend to have more generalists, larger companies tend to have more specialists. So as you look at changing things and optimizing things, does that change? Is that still your Sasha software person, DevOps engineer person, or is it going to change to somebody else?
I would say that until now, for a reason, I was just speaking from the developer's point of view. So for the developer, the job to end, I have a new project. I want to get out with it in front of my manager or whoever is the sponsor of it as fast as I can. And then if I work for a big company, then I want to enable my developers to do this thing following my policies. And basically, today, AutoDevOps ships its own policies. But if AutoDevOps would be just one pre-configured set of policies, but the vision there is that I'm a developer, just give me the best you can. So that's the magic there from developer's point of view. From the let's say, GitLab engineer's point of view, who sets up the pipelines and all these things, from their point of view, they configure everything, how to use SaaS, whether containers are allowed or something is denied by definition, and the same jobs that we call today Autodevops would just flag it red if it contains something in that line. So there are definitely multiple personas, but I think GitLab's focus helps here a lot to when we say that we are developers first.
I want to add that the way that I see it is that AutoDevOps today is this huge monolith where you either need to take everything, and I really liked what Justin said about, you know, making it composable or making it more like Lego building blocks, and I think that's the way to do. That's what we were doing with auto deploy to AWS. So answering Lori, I'm not sure. I think it's multiple personas, but I think that we can approach the different personas with a similar approach, meaning if I don't know what I'm doing and I'm a beginner, give me auto DevOps, give me whatever I can without, you know, knowing too much, and maybe I'll figure it out later and hack it. But if I do, then I want to have full flexibility. And the way that we were doing that was we were creating these atomic operations that you can do with Docker images, similar to what GitHub is doing with GitHub Actions. So you have a specific Docker image that does one thing, like connect to AWS CLI or push to S3, or it just does one thing. And I can select just choose that in order to put into my GitLab CI YAML file. Or if I don't know what I'm doing, I'll just take the full YAML. And then the beauty of Auto DevOps is that you have a bunch of includes that you can include Dast, you can include auto build, you can include whatever stages you want. And that gives you tons of flexibility. So I think this kind of ties in really nicely to the pipeline builder that Verify is working on, and where it kind of asks you what you want to do. I think we should do a similar approach here in Auto DevOps. Like, here's some visualizations. Oh, you're doing to AWS. Why don't you try these templates or these containers, or, you know, something like that.
I really like the idea of combining the builder that we have for pipelines with all of these kind of auto DevOps ideas, so that we could suggest things progressively. So if you have a really complicated pipeline, and then like the next step you want to do is to publish it to a registry, that's kind of available in a preset. And if you don't care, we'll just do it for you. And if you do, you still have the same mechanism in the same place, or the same freedom to set it up yourself. And that could lead to being able to bring in users to new features faster, and also present somebody in a concise place. Like, you have CI pipelines that do this. Here's a bunch of more stuff you could do.
I think two key things that people have been calling out, and I just want to like make a specific point of, is letting people choose and recommending in small batches. So what I mean by letting people choose is, we all know when you go to install software, there's those of us who are picking the wizard and like, ask me as few questions as possible. And then there's those of us who are like, no, I want to check every box and see what you're doing. So I think like whichever persona that is, you're going to end up with that approach. Like somebody who wants to touch all the widgets versus somebody's like, just give me everything that you can and ask me as few questions as possible. And then the second part I like is that thinking of it either in a maturity model or something else, where it's like, this is the 80% we know now, we'll give it to you now. And then let's prompt it in small batches, because everybody knows question fatigue if you ask too much at the same time. So if it makes sense next to recommend the package registry plus this, this, and this, like these three things, because of what you already have, let's ask you the questions around those. And we can mention there's other stuff, but leave you alone about that until you really get to where we found to be the next logical jump point for you for those items.
So
Really appreciate.
In pipeline authoring, we're starting to look into the idea of offering job templates. And this is something that we're thinking about in the near term, because we realize that big pipeline templates, they're overwhelming to beginner users who are not familiar with CI/CD, and then they get this whole pipeline. They don't know how to take it apart and how to make it useful for them. So someone mentioned GitHub Actions. So we're kind of thinking along the same lines, making those job templates, these more granular building blocks available within the pipeline editor. So one would be able to pick and choose. And then the next step would be to make that process as automated as possible. So we haven't done a lot of discovery work around the onboarding itself. I think it's very important that we take it, we take it a step further and look at this more high level vision for new GitLab user onboarding as a whole, or you're creating a new project, and then we ask you questions, what do you need? And then depending on what you need, we give you, okay, we have this automatic magic if you want. If you want some more control, we also have this and that, these templates, and they're very easy to manipulate and adjust using these building blocks. And then, yeah, so we need to provide options to our users when they're ready to answer that question. So again, it kind of ties it back to the onboarding experience, and like going past the actual AutoDevops feature, I feel like one of the problems with approaching this problem is that it's kind of owned by multiple different teams. And I would like to hear some ideas. I know product has been discussing this, like how can we approach this? Because the growth team right now is working on continuous onboarding for new GitLab users, where they are kind of thinking about a similar approach, where they guide a new GitLab user through a series of tasks, like create your repository, set up CI/CD, and so on and so forth. So how do we take it a step further and introduce our users to all of the magic that GitLab can provide? If AutoDevops can assist with that, that's great. We should pursue that. But how would we approach such a big project that requires so much cross-stage collaboration?
I think we'd have to create a couple widgets and framework pieces, and then everyone would have to contribute in their templates and their questions. The way that I'm thinking about it is, from a UI perspective, Sam White is designing a policy builder for all of Secure, and he's ideally going to build a generic engine, for lack of a better word, and then we each will be able to plug in our pieces to it to make it work for us. And so I think having some kind of generic question engine, journey engine, and recommendation widgets that are universal for, usability, consistency, customer expectation setting, but then allow every group to plug in their categories and features with certain, like, if this then that, type items.
One more thing here, I totally agree with all of this that were said, is that what both of you mentioned with the Lego building blocks and already with the atomic Docker images, I would say this part should be extendable by our users, because there, if you have a platform engineer who want to provide their own include template, it should fit really naturally into this whole experience and the pipeline editor, or however you call it.
I know we're thinking big, and that's kind of a tactical question of like, how would we enable others to contribute to it? I do think one of the things that has inhibited us from building that kind of framework and investing in it is that we are in a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy where we say, well, AutoDevops isn't used that much, and so people just include the template, so I don't really need to include what I'm building into the logic of AutoDevops. I just need to publish a template, which is very sound if you look at the actual usage numbers of AutoDevops. So the points that I think Nadia started with, and Maria, actually, I think you were pointing them, the discoverability of AutoDevops is probably the first place you want to start. Then you can build a framework that says, hey, this thing is working, people are using it. Wouldn't you love your features XYZ group to be recommended in this process? Because there's like, what I have said is, I wouldn't blame any product manager from saying, hey, why do I need to integrate with AutoDevops? That's not going to be the most important thing for driving my GMAO, which is the metric that I want to drive. But if AutoDevops was heavily used and it was like, hey, it's just a little bit of effort to add it to this framework that they've built, you would do it in a heartbeat. So I think we if we think about where we want to focus first, it really is about discoverability of this thing. And Maria, you were highlighting a couple of places where it's just not very findable today.
Yeah, and I think whatever solution we come up with, we need to come up with the user experience vision. So the technical implementation is a different thing, but in order to know where we're going with the solution, we need a UX vision. And the only way I can see us doing that is multiple product designers working together. So we could start with mapping the existing journeys. Well, basically we have the vision conversation, but then we have the conversation of the immediate needs, because we have a couple of bugs for DevOps. Autodevops, like the security features currently depend on Autodevops. We need to turn them on for new projects. And just left a point, like which team has the capacity to work on Autodevops. So as designers, we could start working on a like visionary piece, 25% of our time, or I don't know what. But then there's the question I wanted to bring up for the immediate actions that we need to take.
I do want to call out, and I think Maria touched on this point, that I think we should start with designers coming together to figure out how we want all of these pieces to play together. Because then we'll all have a uniform product vision and technical roadmap of what we want to make it happen, and make sure that we avoid pitfalls like Nicole had mentioned, where there's question overload or the discoverability issue never gets resolved. And so we put in this effort and it doesn't go anywhere. So that may be the place we want to start.
I think also something that could be really beneficial is taking all of the user feedback that we've received from usability studies that we've done, CMS studies, category maturity scorecard. I went into Dovetail just a couple minutes ago and searched for Autodevops, and there's a lot of great feedback across different studies. So to help build empathy for each other's users in different stages, that could be a good place to start, is just what feedback have we gotten on it. Lori, I don't know if you could speak to this, but I'm wondering if there's a place where we have like a single source of truth for how users feel about Autodevops, both good and bad, because I know that there's a lot of information, a lot of really great feedback, probably scattered across Dovetail, which for anybody that doesn't know is a new tool that we've been using over the last couple of months to compile all of our research findings, as well as in the channel. I know that in like the secure channel in Slack, there's a lot of account managers or product managers, et cetera, that go in there and say, hey, I'm having a customer that has an issue with this thing. So it seems like there's a lot of really great feedback out there. I wonder if it's worth compiling in one place.
Yeah, it's certainly not in one place right now. It's all those places plus Chorus and some other places as well, I think. So yeah, that would be a really good project for somebody to take on. Becca, and I think it would be very useful for not only this group right here, I think the entire company.
Awesome. I'm happy to volunteer.
Great. We're almost at time here. We have 5 more minutes. So I really like that we started talking about the next steps. So it seems like I agree. I think UX can really help drive the first steps. We need to gather all of the insights that we have. So perhaps we could start with that. And there was an idea in one of the issues, I don't remember who contributed, but there was an idea to run a design sprint. So we can see who would be interested in participating from the UX team. I understand that we would all have to just kind of volunteer time to do that on the side, in addition to the stage work that we're currently doing. But I think it would be very helpful for the UX team to come together and propose a vision for how it could work and how it could help solve the problems that our users are having. Because the way I think about Autodevops, it's a tool to solve our users' problems, right? So if we think about it as a tool that somehow fits into the onboarding experience, when you're creating a new project, how do we automatically provide you with all of the solutions that you need? So we can explore what it might look like. And then based on that, we can see how AutoDevOps can help with creating this or implementing this vision, and what are the next steps we have to take from there.
I love it, and I would also propose maybe a second track that is more for the product management group. And Victor, I know you wouldn't take offense to this, but our present vision for AutoDevOps is very limiting. We all talked about at the start, hey, we have this big vision for what it could accomplish and the business goals it could allow our customers and ourselves to achieve. But if you read our AutoDevOps direction page, it's fairly limiting to kind of what it does today. I can lead an effort with the product group. I can start an MR and we can contribute to it that would outline a little bit more of what we think is possible and achievable, like what we would love to see. And then that I would hope would give some better guidance to the UX team. I feel like we would be saying, hey, UX team, like we said some words in a meeting and you should just take that as direction to go run with. And I think it would be better for us to write down and agree on, like, these are the words that are kind of solidly representative of the product group's viewpoint.
I wonder if it would be in our best interest, along with Kenny's point of starting with product, kind of refining that vision page in the handbook, and give research with Lori and Becca a chance to gather all of the insights that are everywhere around what users are saying about AutoDevOps. If we have those two artifacts kind of together, it would really accelerate whatever effort the design team is going to work on next. So I think that's really smart.
Yeah. I would be happy to get some product people together for this.
And Victor, I actually will take the action on this. I think I've been the one pushing, and so I will propose it and I'll send it around to the whole team. We can start there.
Shall I go back to my question for the immediate action for solving the immediate problems we have? So the security features don't work without AutoDevOps turned on. AutoDevOps is turned on instances, like local instances, but not on GitLab.com. We're planning to turn on AutoDevOps for new projects. Is that going to have an implication for past projects, or is the assumption that they have figured out the security features without AutoDevOps? And who's going to run the work for enabling AutoDevOps on new projects? Do we know?
I think it's a totally independent question of this discussion now. So if you want to be a great product, then we should be brave enough to even deprecate existing ones. And it might be a better idea to think about the existing one, that we don't want to enable the current one for everyone, because it might be a huge failure. And after that, we can't use even the name AutoDevOps because nobody will want to try it out. So I would not necessarily mix these two topics together.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because the history is we have tried to turn AutoDevOps on for everyone on GitLab.com, and it was not received well. So we rolled most of it back. So I would be cautious about doing that. And to Victor's point, it sounds like we like the branding term for AutoDevOps. We would like to have a new experience. Maybe we should wait to turn it on for everyone until we get that new experience. I think that I don't know who the driver of turn it on for everyone, if that was a secure groups question. So I don't want to like suggest
it was Victor who opened the issue in response to Marcel's discovery. So I don't know who's discussing the solution, but I thought it's relevant since we're discussing AutoDevOps.
Yeah, right now, because we're at various points where we're dependent on certain things like having review apps and other things. And I don't think it would be pretty from a secure perspective. And we're actually going a different route to make it much easier to turn on by default and make it discoverable. Obviously, if AutoDevOps becomes more wizardy, we would jump on that in a heartbeat, or at least I know license scanning and dependency scanning would. But as it is today, like, I'm not excited about turning that on for everybody on .com the way it is today.
Does that answer your question, Maria?
Yeah, I think we can close the issue of turning AutoDevOps on by default for new projects. That's my understanding, right?
Yes, that's what I heard.
Cool. Thank you.
All right. Thank you,
We're at
everyone.
time.
We are at time. Do you want to take this, Nadia? Go ahead.
Thanks, Ian. Yeah, I think we're at time. Thank you so much, Aaron, for participating. I feel like it was an extremely productive discussion. It was great to see everyone represented, product, UX, engineering. So thanks so much for contributing. I'm going to summarize the outcomes of this discussion and the next steps in the ThinkBig issue, and I will tag you all. And yeah, so the product will come forward with the vision, and the UX research and UX will take it from there and collaborate on gathering insights. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.